My name is Olivia. I'm 28 now, but this story starts when I was 24, and my own mother told me my little sister would be marrying my fiance in my wedding dress. Before I tell you how that single, soul-crushing moment led to a vicious harassment campaign, a high-stakes courtroom battle, and a lawsuit that would change all of our lives forever, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this. It all started with the sound of a key in the lock. That familiar, comforting click that always meant I was home, safe. I ducked out of work an hour early, a migraine pounding behind my eyes like a drum. All I wanted was to collapse on the couch in the arms of my fiancé, Ethan. We'd been together for 2 perfect years, engaged for 6 blissful months. We were that couple, the ones who finished each other's sentences, the ones who were already planning out the names of our future kids. My life felt like a movie, and I was the star. But the apartment was silent when I walked in. Eerily silent. A sweater was thrown over a chair, but it wasn't mine. It was a shade of pink I would never wear. "Ethan?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the stillness. No answer. A cold knot of dread began to tighten in my stomach. It was a primal feeling, an instinct that something was deeply wrong. I walked down the short hallway toward our bedroom, my footsteps feeling strangely loud on the hardwood floors. The door was cracked open just enough for a sliver of light to escape. And that's when I heard it. A giggle. It wasn't my giggle. It was high-pitched, familiar, and it sent a shockwave of ice through my veins. It was my sister's laugh. My little sister, Zoe. Zoe, who had just graduated from her expensive private college and was living back at home, finding herself. Zoe, who I'd helped with her resume just last week. I pushed the door open, my hand trembling so hard I could barely control it. And then, my world didn't just shatter. It ceased to exist. They were there, in my bed, tangled in the sheets I had bought, under the roof I paid for. The sight was so fundamentally wrong, it broke my brain. I couldn't process it. For a long second, all I could do was stare, my mind a screaming void of white noise. Then, the void filled with red-hot rage. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. It was colder than that. I turned on my heel, marched to the closet, and began pulling out every single piece of Ethan's clothing. His suits, his favorite hoodies, the ridiculous Hawaiian shirt he loved. I carried the armful to our balcony, the cold air hitting my face, and without a second thought, I threw it all over the side. I went back for her things, her purse, her jacket, her shoes, and sent them flying after his. I stood at the bedroom door. They were scrambling now, shouting my name in panicked whispers. I just looked at the 2 people I had trusted most in the world, my face a blank mask of betrayal. "Get out," I said. My voice was low, flat, and more menacing than any scream. "Get out of my home. Now." They left, a pathetic whirlwind of limbs and muttered excuses. I slammed the door and locked it, the deadbolt clicking into place with a sound of finality. My knees gave out, and I slid down the door to the floor, my body finally succumbing to violent, uncontrollable shakes. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold my broken pieces together. I should call the police, I thought dimly. Isn't this some kind of violation? But before I could even form another thought, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up, "Mom." A wave of relief washed over me. Okay, I thought, gasping for breath. She'll fix this. Mom will know what to do. She'll tell me it's going to be okay. I was a child again, running to my mother with a scraped knee. I answered the phone, my voice a broken whisper. "Mom? Olivia, what in God's name is wrong with you?" Her voice was a whip crack, sharp and devoid of any warmth. "How could you throw your sister's things off the balcony? She is absolutely mortified. Ethan is here, he told us everything." The words hit me like a physical blow. "He told you everything?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "Did he tell you where he was?" Did he tell you he was sleeping with your other daughter in the bed I share with him? There was a beat of icy silence. Zoe is very emotional right now, she said, her tone defensive. She's young, she gets confused. And Ethan is a very handsome, charming man. Honestly, Olivia, you've been so focused on your career. These things happen when you neglect a relationship. And there it was. Not just a lack of comfort, but blame. It was my fault. I was floored, speechless. In that moment, I realized I hadn't just lost a fiancé. I had been kicked out of my own family. The door had been slammed in my face, and they were all on the other side. To understand how my own mother could be so cruel, you have to understand the foundation our family was built on. It was a simple, brutal hierarchy. There was Zoe, the sun around which we all orbited. And then there was me, a distant, functional moon. I was the responsible one, the practical one, the one who was just expected to manage. The roles were set early. I'll never forget when I was 16, I worked a whole summer at a greasy diner to save up for my first car. I bought a 10-year-old, reliable but ugly sedan. I was so proud of it. 2 months later, for Zoe's 17th birthday, my parents took out a loan and bought her a brand new, bright red convertible. She just deserves something pretty and safe, honey, my dad had said, patting my shoulder as if that explained everything. My hard-earned independence felt like a punishment next to her gifted privilege. This dynamic defined our lives. I got scholarships and worked 3 jobs to get through state college with no debt. Zoe went to a prestigious private university, and my parents proudly paid for her tuition, telling everyone about the sacrifices they were making for her future. There was no mention of my own college fund, which had mysteriously vanished to support her better opportunities. When I finally met Ethan, I thought he was my escape. He was kind, ambitious, and loved me for my drive. When I introduced him to my family, they were ecstatic. My mom pulled me aside and whispered, "He's a catch, Olivia. Don't mess this up." I see now she wasn't giving me advice, she was giving me a warning. Don't be so focused on your career that you lose this prized possession. Zoe, for her part, had been eerily quiet that night, her eyes tracking Ethan's every move. I'd mistaken her silence for shyness. It wasn't. It was observation. She was sizing up the asset, waiting for the right moment for a hostile takeover. The only place I ever felt truly seen was at work. My company had a fantastic mentorship program, and early in my career, I was paired with a senior director, a formidable man named Mr. Harrison. He was sharp, demanding, but incredibly fair. I remember one of my first big projects, I made a calculation error that cost us a small account. My direct manager publicly humiliated me in a team meeting. I went home wanting to quit. The next day, Mr. Harrison called me into his cavernous office. I was sure I was being fired. He gestured for me to sit. "I heard what happened in the meeting," he said, his voice calm. "Your manager was out of line. But let me tell you something about mistakes, Olivia. Mistakes are data. They're not failures. They are simply pieces of information that tell you what not to do next time. Acknowledge the data, learn from it, and move on. Don't you ever let someone else's reaction define your worth." His words were a lifeline. It was the kind of powerful, validating guidance I'd always longed for from my own father but never received. That validation was a universe away from the phone call I received an hour after my world imploded. My mother called back. Her voice had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a chillingly calm, practical tone that was 1,000 times more cruel. "Olivia," she began, "your father and I have been talking, and we need you to be reasonable." Reasonable? I choked out, a hysterical laugh bubbling in my throat. "Yes. All the deposits for the wedding have been paid. The venue, the caterer, the florist. It's all non-refundable. It was a significant portion of our savings. We can't just throw that kind of money away." My blood ran cold as I started to understand where she was going. "What are you trying to say, Mom?" "We're saying the wedding is still on," she declared, as if announcing the weather. "It's the only logical solution. There's just going to be one small change." She took a breath. "Zoe will be taking your place as the bride. She'll wear your dress. It's a perfect fit." I was completely silent. My brain simply could not compute the level of betrayal. They weren't just forgiving Zoe. They were promoting her. They were handing her my entire life on a silver platter, and I was expected to step aside gracefully. "This is for the best, Olivia," she continued, her voice softening into that cloying, manipulative purr she used when she wanted to get her way. "Let's be honest, you've always been a bit difficult. So focused on work. Ethan and Zoe have a real, passionate connection. You can see it. You're the strong one. You'll be fine. Don't be selfish about this. Think of the family." I hung up the phone. I didn't say another word. The cold clarity that washed over me was absolute. This wasn't a family. This was a transactional entity, and I had just been deemed a bad investment. So, I liquidated my assets. I stood up, walked to my laptop, and began the systematic demolition of my old life. I blocked every family member on every platform. I opened a new bank account. I spent the next 2 days on the phone, a cold, robotic version of myself. I canceled the venue. I canceled the caterer. I canceled the band. Every deposit that could be refunded, I had routed to my new, secret account. I terminated my apartment lease, agreeing to pay the penalty. I packed my 2 suitcases with the only things that were truly mine: my degrees, my work portfolio, my clothes, and a small box of photos from before Ethan. Everything else, the furniture we'd picked out, the kitchenware, the life we were supposed to build, I left behind. It was a ghost ship, and I was abandoning it. I walked out of that building and never looked back. It wasn't a breakup. It was an amputation. The next 3 years were my wilderness. The pain of what they did was a constant, roaring furnace inside me, and my only option was to find something to burn. So I burned ambition. I burned late nights and early mornings. I poured every ounce of my being into my career because it was the only thing left that was truly mine. It was the only relationship that wouldn't betray me. My first promotion to senior manager came with a salary that made me gasp. For the first time, I felt the solid ground of true financial independence beneath my feet. I remember seeing their wedding photos online about 6 months after it all happened. A friend of a cousin had posted them. There was Zoe, radiant in the wedding dress I had cried tears of joy in when I first tried it on. There was Ethan, smiling by her side. And surrounding them were my aunts, uncles, cousins, my entire family. They were all there, smiling, celebrating on the grave of my heart. They all knew the story. And they all chose a side. The pain was sharp, but I was at my desk, working on a high-stakes merger analysis. I took that sharp pain, and I turned it into focus. I worked for 36 hours straight, closed the deal, and got a commendation from Mr. Harrison. There were moments of profound, crushing loneliness. I remember being sick with the flu about a year in, lying in my small studio apartment, too weak to even make tea. I had no one to call. The isolation was a physical weight. I scrolled through my phone, seeing pictures of my mother holding Zoe's firstborn son. My nephew. A child I would never know. The urge to call, to beg for a scrap of connection, was overwhelming. But then I looked at the framed print of my first big solo project success on my wall. I had done that. Me. Alone. I put the phone down, took some medicine, and waited for the fever to break. My title changed. Director. Senior director. My tiny studio became a 1-bedroom apartment with a small balcony. After another grueling year and a project that revolutionized our international logistics, it became a sprawling corner apartment with a view that made my heart ache with its beauty. Mr. Harrison had become the company's CEO, and he never forgot me. He saw my relentless drive, and he rewarded it. 3 years to the day after I walked out of my old life, I was named Vice President of Global Strategy, the youngest VP in the company's 100-year history. My salary was now something I never could have dreamed of. I had built a new life, a fortress of success they couldn't touch. And then, after 3 years of blessed, uninterrupted silence, my phone rang. An unknown number. My policy was to ignore them, but a strange impulse made me answer. Olivia? The voice was hesitant, watery. It was my mother. It's me, honey. I said nothing. My throat was too tight to form words. We miss you, she whispered. Your father, oh, Olivia, he's not doing well. It's his heart. He collapsed this morning. He's in the ICU at St. Mary's Hospital. The doctors, they don't know. He's asking for you. Please, just come see him. It might be your last chance. Panic, cold and absolute, obliterated 3 years of carefully constructed walls. My dad. What if he was dying? What if my last memory of him was his passive face as my life was stolen? The thought of a funeral, of final regrets, was more than I could bear. Against every screaming instinct in my body, I whispered, I'll be there. I drove to the hospital in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I ran into the main lobby, my heart pounding, and called her back. Where are you? What room? Oh, we're just grabbing a coffee downstairs in the main cafe, she said, her voice suddenly breezy. Come meet us here. I rounded the corner into the coffee shop, and my blood turned to ice. There they were. All of them. My mother, my father, looking tanned and perfectly healthy, Zoe, and a paunchy-looking Ethan. And chasing each other around their table were 2 small, shrieking toddlers. It wasn't a medical emergency. It was an ambush. The bitterness that rose in my throat was so acidic it almost made me gag. He's not sick, I said, my voice flat. My mother actually had the gall to look ashamed for a split second. We didn't know how else to get you to come talk to us, she mumbled, stirring her coffee. They spent the next 10 minutes delivering a masterclass in entitlement. My dad had been laid off. My mom's nursing shifts weren't enough. Zoe was a stay-at-home mom, and Ethan's sales commissions had dried up. They were drowning in debt. They spun a tale of woe, ending with them looking at me expectantly. Ethan spoke for the first time, his voice weak. We're just in a tough spot, Liv. Then Zoe, the architect of my misery, looked at me, her eyes devoid of shame. I need to get a job, but I can't afford childcare. We were thinking, you have that huge apartment now. You could just watch the kids a couple of days a week. It would be a great way for you to finally get to know your niece and nephew. She smiled, a sweet, poisonous smile. Or, if that's too much trouble, you could just pay for a full-time nanny. The best one, of course. With your salary, you wouldn't even notice it. I looked at them. I looked at the 2 innocent children who were products of this toxic dysfunction. And I started to laugh. It wasn't a sound of humor. It was the sound of a lock breaking, of a chain snapping. It was the sound of my last shred of familial obligation turning to dust and blowing away. No, I said, the single word cutting through their chatter. I stood up, my chair scraping against the tile. Absolutely not. I looked at each of them in turn. This is the family you chose. This is the life you built together. You can figure out how to pay for it together. I turned and walked out, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. I felt their eyes on my back, but for the first time, it didn't matter. I thought that was the end of it. I thought my no was a period at the end of a long, painful sentence. But I was wrong. It was just a comma. Their desperation curdled into something dark and vicious. The social media campaign was the first volley. My mother posted long, rambling essays about her cold-hearted, ungrateful daughter who was hoarding her wealth while her family suffered. They created a GoFundMe page with a picture of me from my college graduation, telling a story about how they'd sacrificed everything for my education, only to be abandoned. My aunts and cousins shared it, adding their own 2 cents about how I'd always been selfish. Then, they brought the fight to my doorstep. They started showing up at my luxury apartment building, buzzing my intercom relentlessly, forcing the doorman to call security. One evening, my mother and Zoe just camped out in the lobby, weeping to anyone who would listen about their cruel daughter upstairs. It was a calculated performance of victimhood. The final straw was when they came to my office. My mother and Zoe, dressed in their Sunday best, waltzed into the marble and glass lobby of my corporate headquarters. They demanded to see me, and when the receptionist politely refused, they created a scene, wailing about how their daughter had been turned against them by money and power. It was a 5-star theatrical production, and it ended with 2 security guards escorting them out. The next morning, I was summoned to Mr. Harrison's office. The top-floor corner office with a view of the entire city. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. I was a liability. "Olivia, sit down," he said, his face unreadable. My executive assistant gave me a full report on the disturbance in the lobby yesterday. This comes after my office, as well as the offices of 3 other board members, has been receiving anonymous emails for the past month. He slid a folder across the polished mahogany desk. They allege that your rapid promotion was a result of inappropriate relationships with senior staff. They claim you've been embezzling company funds. They claim a lot of things. I opened the folder, my hands shaking. The printouts of the vile, anonymous emails made me feel sick. We, of course, ran a discreet internal audit the moment the first email arrived, he continued, his voice hardening. It was all, as expected, baseless, libelous garbage. "Olivia, this is no longer family drama. This is a coordinated harassment and defamation campaign. You are a vice president of this corporation. An attack on your character is an attack on this company's integrity. We protect our assets. Do you have a personal lawyer?" I shook my head, mute with shock and a strange, burgeoning sense of hope. "You do now," he said, pushing a business card across the desk. "His name is David. He's a bulldog. He's the best litigator in the city. The firm's legal department will be handling the retainer. I want you to go on the offensive. I want you to shut this down. Permanently." Meeting David was like breathing fresh air after being locked in a toxic room. He was sharp, focused, and radiated a quiet intensity. I laid out the entire sordid story, from the day of the betrayal to the scene in the lobby. I gave him the folder from Mr. Harrison, the screenshots, the security footage. He listened without interruption, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "They've given us a gift, Olivia," he said when I finished. "A big, beautiful gift wrapped in legal paper. This isn't just a restraining order. This is a slam-dunk civil suit. Defamation, libel, tortious interference with business. Our job isn't just to win. It's to make them understand, in the only language they seem to comprehend, money and consequences, that their actions are unacceptable." The courtroom was exactly as intimidating as I'd imagined. My family huddled on the other side with a flustered-looking public defender. Zoe took the stand first, dissolving into practiced tears, painting a picture of a naive young woman who made a mistake and a cruel older sister who never forgave her. David's cross-examination was surgical. He dismantled her story piece by piece, catching her in lie after lie about timelines and her knowledge of my engagement. Then came my mother. She was defiant, portraying herself as a loving matriarch trying to hold her family together. "So, in your view, Mrs. Smith, David asked calmly. Your younger daughter's emotional comfort was more important than the sanctity of your older daughter's engagement and home? A mother does what she has to do for her children, she sniffed. Her arrogance was her undoing. The highlight was Mr. Harrison. He walked to the stand, a pillar of corporate power and integrity. He calmly detailed the harassment campaign, using terms like brand integrity, executive security protocols, and fiduciary duty. He explained the financial cost of the internal audit and the potential damage to shareholder confidence when a key executive is targeted. He wasn't just my boss, he was a warrior for corporate order, and my family was the barbarian at the gate. Finally, it was my turn. The public defender tried to paint me as a vindictive dragon, hoarding my wealth. Isn't it true, Ms. Olivia, he sneered, that you abandoned your family? That with your massive salary, you couldn't spare a dime for your struggling sister? I looked past him, making eye contact with the judge. I spoke, not to the lawyer, but to the room, to the official record. Family, I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the silent room, is not an obligation you are born into. It is a relationship you build. It's built on trust, respect, and safety. The people sitting over there did not just break my trust. They demolished it. They took my home, my future, my sense of safety, and handed it to someone else as a party favor. They taught me that blood is not a bond, it is simply a biological fact. I did not abandon my family. I escaped a toxic environment that was suffocating me. And everything I have today, I built myself, not on a foundation they gave me, but from the ashes of the life they burned down. The judge was a stern-looking woman in her 60s. She listened to everything, her face impassive. When it was time for the verdict, she looked over her glasses at my family. I have listened to the testimony for 2 days, she began, her voice crisp. This court does not see a family squabble. It sees a textbook case of narcissistic abuse, followed by a campaign of harassment and defamation that is both shocking and malicious. She granted the permanent restraining order. Then, she addressed the civil suit. For damages related to defamation, infliction of emotional distress, and tortious interference with business, this court awards the plaintiff, Ms. Olivia, the sum of $115,000. A collective gasp went through my family's side of the room. Zoe let out a strangled cry. My mother shot to her feet, her face a mask of purple fury. You can't do this. She's our daughter. The judge banged her gavel, the sound cracking like a whip. Order! I will have order in my court. She glared at my mother. And for that outburst, I find you in contempt of court. That will be an additional $5,000 fine. She then looked at Zoe, who was now openly sobbing. You as well. Another $5,000. Then to my father, who was just sitting there, slack-jawed. And you, sir, for your complicity in this circus, $5,000. The silence that followed was the most profound silence I have ever heard. It was the sound of complete and total defeat. It was the sound of justice. In the hallway outside, my mother made one last, desperate lunge. She grabbed my arm, her nails like claws. We are your blood, she hissed, her face contorted with hate. You will never, ever escape that. My father stood behind her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Olivia, please. He started weakly. I ignored him. I looked at my mother's hand on my arm and then met her eyes. I gently but firmly pried her fingers off me. My voice was calm, devoid of all emotion. Blood is a biological fact, nothing more, I said. Loyalty, love, respect, those are choices. And you all made your choices a very long time ago. Goodbye, Mrs. Smith. Using her formal last name was the final severance. I turned and walked away without looking back, the sound of their despair fading behind me. That was 2 years ago. The restraining order worked. The silence was immediate and absolute. About a year after the verdict, I received an email from a new address. It was from my father. 5 short words. I am sorry. I failed. I stared at it for a long time. It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. I didn't reply. I created a new folder in my email, named it the past, and moved his message into it. Then I went back to work. Forgiveness, I learned, is a private matter. It's about letting go of the hope for a different past, not about letting toxic people back into your present. My life now is quiet, and it is beautiful. My work continues to challenge and fulfill me. I started a mentorship program within my company for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds, trying to be the Mr. Harrison they might need. I have a small, tight-knit group of friends, my chosen family. We have dinner parties, go on weekend trips, and show up for each other. I'm even dating. It's slow, it's cautious, but it's hopeful. My apartment is no longer a fortress, it's a sanctuary. On the wall in my study is a massive, beautiful map of the world, covered in pins from the places I've been. Sometimes, when I'm planning my next vacation, I close my eyes and throw a small, soft-tipped dart. Wherever it lands, from Patagonia to Kyoto, that's where I decide to go next. The past is a closed chapter, legally and emotionally. My future is an open map, a world of possibilities waiting to be explored. And I am the one holding the dart. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but I felt it was important to share. I have to ask you all, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? How would you have handled it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, I'll be reading them. And if my story resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for more. It means the world.